All right, here we are live again for our last episode in our series of why people go towards the dark side, towards bullying. And this is we're going to talk about how to catch yourself early so that you don't fall into toxicity and you can improve your career hopefully. One of the first things I want to say about catching yourself early is that it's super, super, super important to understand that, especially if you're in careers like I was in social work and academics and teaching and nursing and health and, you know, even being an attorney, right? That those are really high risk professions, that they're not, and being aware that you're going into a profession where toxicity and bullying is rampant is really, really important. That awareness that you might be walking into something that seems like your dream job, but might be something else, I think is really important. So we're going to start from the beginning, as if you don't have your job, your dream job yet, and that you're going into or that you could be going into a toxic culture. So we'll walk through that and how you can really protect yourself and keep yourself from not getting, um, not turning into a workplace bully, that you can see the signs. The first thing is, again, if you know you're going into a high risk profession, like again, I just listed a whole bunch of them: education, higher education, healthcare, nursing, teaching, in public and K through private education, and also in higher education. If you're going to be an attorney, they recently found, I think Forbes did a study and found that 1 in 5 attorneys are experiencing workplace bullying. So if you know you're going into those careers, you need to be aware that you could be going into bullying. And don't do this kind of stuff. Well, it can't happen to me. Yeah, it can. It can happen to anybody. You're not immune from being bullied. You're not immune from being part of bully culture. And the fact that if you say it doesn't happen to you, you're living in a sea of denial, especially if you're going into high risk professions. So think about it ahead of time. And you can screen for toxicity and bullying. There are almost always red flags that bullying is happening. Okay, so screen for those things. Know what to look for. I've written on my website, Stop Bully Culture, Stand Up Against Bullying. You can go to my blog. There's an article on that. I have a screening for toxicity guide that helps you think about and how to screen for it. And the other thing, you have to trust your instincts. Trust yourself. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Not that you don't deserve good things, you do, but if it seems like it's way too good, it might be a problem or a sign that something's coming down the way. So screen for toxicity and bullying and know what to look for. Those things are really, really important. And having awareness and knowing what it is also is important. If you're screening for it, you have to know what the red flags are and the signs are that it could be developing in your organization. That's important. And the other thing I think is, I'm a huge fan of having self-reflection skills and reflecting on how you are coming across to other people. That's really important, because it's not just about being in the workplace, right? We don't go into a workplace and we get to be whoever we want to be. It's about how we can fit into the workplace, and part of that is adapting who we are and adapting to the workplace. And I think that's really important, because one of the things I think, once you've been bullied, there's a tendency for recipients of bullying to say, I don't have to change or do anything different in the workplace. You're the one bullying me. And that's just not how it works. When you're in bully culture, what has to happen is everybody really needs to kind of change their behavior for the betterment of the whole organizational culture. That includes the person who's being victimized. Okay. And so when we come into a workplace, we have to learn professional skills. And there is not a universal set of professional skills. Those are learned in the workplace. So when you go from one workplace to another workplace, those professional skills that you have need to be changed and adapted. So my professional skills as a small business owner are not the same professional skills I needed to teach. Okay, so they're different kinds of skills that you have to learn and master. And the likelihood that your workplace is going to teach you how to teach those professional skills, it's probably not going to happen. I've never worked in a place where they taught professional skills. The assumption was that you have them. So professional skills that I think are super important are empathy. Empathy, not everybody has empathy. Learned how to be empathetic in the workplace. That's super important. Have self-reflective skills, meaning how am I coming across as a professional, and how are my professional behavior, or how are my skills, how are other people interpreting that? Okay, so for example, here's a good example. In my personal life, okay, my youngest son, Ethan, speaking of, he just text messaged me. I am a loud talker. Okay, I happen to have a very, very loud voice, and sometimes that loud voice, coming from his perspective, he can see he thinks that I'm yelling. Okay, especially when he was at home and a little boy, he would think that I was yelling. And as soon as I would loud talk and he thought that was yelling, he basically shut down, would stop listening to me. And so I had a couple of choices there. I could reflect on my loud talking because I'll still say, well, I'm loud talking, but he's interpreting it as yelling. And when he wasn't always the neatest kids, he didn't always meet my standard of cleanliness, and I would loud talk, he would interpret that as yelling, and then he wouldn't clean his room. And so I would loud talk, he would interpret that as yelling, the room didn't get clean. At some point I had to self-reflect and say, am I going to, die on the hill that says I'm not loud talking, or I'm yelling, or do I want the room to be cleaned? So I had to change how I talked to him, and I had to bring my tone down, whether he interpreted it as yelling or I wanted to say it was loud talking. It didn't make any difference. My end goal was to get the room cleaned. I had to change how I approached him and have a softer, gentler tone. And I got the room cleaned, which was my end goal. And so sometimes what I think, aka I think I'm loud talking, how someone else interprets my behavior, Ethan, I'm yelling, it's not about whether I'm loud talking, it's about how he saw me. And so then I had to change my behavior and bring my tone down so that he didn't see me as yelling, and that I got what I wanted, which was for him to clean my room, or clean his room, right? And so sometimes it's not about what we're doing, it's about how we're being seen. And how we're being seen makes a difference, and we have to change our behavior. And so that's what I mean when it comes to self-reflection, is how I'm being seen might not be what I think, but how I'm being seen, it's how people are seeing me. I hope that makes sense. I did a presentation a few years ago, and so this was a person who was a military person, and he said, they see me as barking orders when I see myself as just asking them to do things. And again, it's the same thing with Ethan and the loud talking. Do you want your team to get things done? Then you're going to have to change your approach. And that's self-reflection, is being able to not only see that there might be how you're coming across is being seen as a problem, and also your willingness to change. And part of that is empathy, is being able to understand that if I am yelling at Ethan and he's seeing me as yelling, then that is a problem, because I don't want to be yelling at my kid, right? I don't want to be barking orders at my team. I want my team to get things done, and how I'm coming across and being able to see it from their perspective gets me to change my behavior, and that is so important. The other thing too is when you're in a toxic and bullying culture, one of the things that you really have to understand is how you are seeing other people. Because as we've talked about over the course of this series, is that one of the things that happens in a group dynamic is that we go along to get along. So that's one of the things you have to ask yourself. And that's one of the things, if you find yourself just going along and not wanting to speak up or take action, then that's a problem. It's a sign that something is wrong and that you might need to figure out how you can stand up amongst the crowd, and even if there are risk factors for yourself. Because I think the most problematic role in bully culture and toxicity is the bystander, because there's a lot of power in numbers, and when more people start to go along with the bully to get along, then that is a real problem. And so that's one of the things that's super important, is to figure out how you feel about people. And if the hair on the back of your neck is, stood up 6 weeks ago and now it just feels like everyday normal behavior, that's another sign that there's a problem, right? So again, being able to look at things from hindsight to where you were to where you are is important. The other thing I think, again, when we talk about bystanders, because they really are problematic, is, we tell them to speak up, and those campaigns really are worthless, in my opinion, because if they could speak up and they knew how to speak up, they probably would. Because if you're a bystander and you want to say something, you do. But a lot of times, again, bystanders are the real problem in workplace bullying and toxic cultures, because when you have the majority of people going along to get along and you're ostracizing one or two people in your workplace, that's a clear sign that something is wrong. And so instead of telling bystanders to speak up, we have to get people to develop the skills to take action and do something. And bystanders can be better. Instead of them telling them to speak up, what we need to tell them is to be better than what they're doing. And I just created the Better Bystander bundle on my website, which you can also get, which helps people develop the skills to, maybe to speak up, to assess their risks so they can take action. And that's one of the things I think is super important when it comes to toxicity and bullying, is there's not one person that's going to come in and save you. Like, bystanders are not going to stop workplace bullying, one, because they don't know how, and we have to teach people the skills to do that. So if you find yourself in an environment where there's toxicity, you have to learn and develop the skills to address it. This is victims, and this is bystanders. There's no magic pill or magic thing that's going to come in to stop workplace bullying or toxicity. It's going to require skill development on a large array of people in the workplace, yourself included. So if you are if you find yourself being victimized, then you should reach out and ask for help. If you find yourself as a bystander, another thing you can do is reach out and ask for help. But of course, I'm going to say that there are some things when you're in toxicity that are super important, and everybody should be doing them, including bystanders, which is to document. Okay? And the reason that documentation is so important for people who are being victimized is you can find points in wherever you're at, if you're, so those vulnerable points where you might be more vulnerable to being bullied, and then you can plan and strategize about how how to handle those situations better. Because one of the things that recipients of bullying do all the time is they defend themselves. They become extremely defensive, and when you become defensive, you're vulnerable to more bullying. So if you learn how to protect yourself and to shut down bullies, then you're not as vulnerable to more bullying. So if you think you are being bullied, you have to develop skills. If you are watching bullying, you have to develop skills, because we're just not taught the professional skills. Really, we're not taught the professional skills to be in a semi-healthy workplace, let alone one that's toxic. And so you have to learn and develop more skills. And of course, you know that I can help you with that if you're interested. And there's nothing wrong with that, to get help. The problem is that we get into these ruts when we're in toxic and bully culture, and then everybody becomes a hamster on a wheel, not wanting to get off and take a look at what's happening and maybe how they can better protect themselves, how they can improve or reduce their vulnerability to bullying. If you're a bystander, how you can get off the hamster wheel and take action. Again, and I'm not saying speak up. I'm talking about, at the very minimum, you should be documenting. And do you know how to do that? I'm going to guess you probably don't. Okay. And do you know how to, disengage with a bully? I'm going to guess you probably don't. Those are all strategies and things that you can learn. Just like we expect victims to do those things, bystanders can also do it. So what I'm really saying, and the bottom line, is that if you're in sort of a toxic culture, you need to do something. Nothing is not an option. You need to do something, and you can learn how to do something. I have plenty of. If you go to shop.stopbullyculture.com, I have a ton of resources that are both affordable and effective in how to take action. The reality is, again, if you're in high-risk professions, the likelihood that you get into some bully culture is damn near 100%. How you manage it and handle it, now that's up to you. And I highly recommend, if you're a bystander, that you get the Better Bystander bundle. If you're looking for how to document, to take action, go to the Workplace Accountability Toolkit on my website, and those things can help you. Now, I don't know what we will be doing next week, because this is the end of our series. If you have any ideas, or you'd like me to talk about some different things, let me know. I might come up with a new series idea that seemed, for me, was very helpful to have, several weeks of something to talk about. But on that note, I think I will end it for this evening. If there's anything you need, as always, you can let me know. And thank you so much for being here, and I hope you enjoyed this series.